Jacinto and Taya watched the monkey grooming itself. The small animal sat on a branch a few meters above the boys. The jungle had grown damp and begun to lose light. "Go on," Taya said. "Bet you couldn't hit it. If you do, you might be my brother after all." Jacinto bit his tongue and wrapped his fingers around one of the spears. He closed one eye, extended back, and threw it. The monkey sat unharmed as the silent weapon flew by, only brushing the leaves and leaving a clatter in the distance. Taya jumped up and down. "See? I knew it. It's true what everyone says." He laughed louder and longer than he should have, except Jacinto wasn't stirred by his brother's taunts, as it wasn't his incompetence that made him miss. A shadow crept down a branch above the monkey. It moved like living velvet. Taya saw it. It slithered behind the little grey ape. Jacinto backed up towards his now armed brother. The shimmering predator sunk its 4 front teeth into the primate's fleshy torso. There was a flash of blood and grey fur. The monster landed with a thud on the log near the boys. Its nose and bottom lip, painted with the monkey's contents, crept closer. It leapt. Taya screamed. It was on Jacinto's left leg, its bladed claws deep. Blood spurted like serpents from the leg upwards, spraying the younger brother's fist as he brought it down on the creature's head. Taya launched the spear he forgot he was holding. It skimmed the beast, grazing enough fur and flesh for it to be distracted. It hissed, and its back arched. It pounced forward at the older brother, but as Taya rolled, the beast lost its footing on wet stone. There was a crunch as the panther's face met mossy rock. Humiliated, it scuttled off into the deep green, with its teeth leaving a trail behind it. Taya trudged through the jungle, dragging his half-dead brother. The injured brother spoke. "Home? Taya, where are we?" Taya didn't look at his brother. The cold fist of the situation gripped his stomach. There would still be much ground to cover yet. They went through mud and over logs, but it wasn't long before even Taya couldn't even find the strength to carry his brother. He found a clearing and lay down next to him, fully aware that he may fall asleep. A fragrance, bitter and entrancing, twirled with the wind and met Taya. His nostrils flared as he sat up. It came from just outside the clearing.
He tried to stay silent as he moved to a tree nearby.
A figure stood by what looked to be a half-made-up house. The wind seemed to stop whirring and the animals had stopped fidgeting. When Taya came close, he could see that it wasn't a house at all, but a well. The figure sat on the structure's edge. He was darker than what Taya had seen before. From his knees up, he was draped in thick feathers and covered in architectural tattoos. There wasn't a weapon in sight. Taya approached the well. "My brother, he's really hurt. Can you help?" The feathered man nodded and pulled a small knife from under his waistcloth. He advanced towards Taya. "No, please." Taya backed away with his palms baring. The feathered man stopped and pushed the small blade through his own forearm without a wince. Blood oozed from the small wound as he removed the blade. "Come," he said. The man reached over to the edge of the well, cupped a handful of the viscous water and splashed it onto his wound. It sizzled, and then like clay joining, the flesh came together. The feathered man smiled at the older sibling before finding his place back on the well. Taya wasn't stupid. He snatched the cup, filled it, and ran back to where his brother lay. Jacinto came to life and began writhing on the ground. Sizzling and groans were the only things to be heard. Taya, horrified, sprinted to the well. "What is this? What's wrong with him?" said the older brother to the man. The feathered figure gestured and looked to where Jacinto laid. But now, Jacinto stood. The feathered man spoke before Taya could.
"Now, it is up to you whether or not you tell the others about this."
"Why wouldn't we?" Taya laughed, looking at his brother. "It's a godsend. We'll have no more sickness."
"Think harder, child."
Then the feathered man turned away from the well and walked into the viridian walls of the jungle. The boy's father, Zoc, lowered the cigar from his mouth and moved some of the blood away from Jacinto's leg. "I don't understand. There's too much of it. You should not be standing," said Zoc. The boys looked at one another. "A man helped us," Taya said. "I've never seen him before, but he was darker than us, father." His tribe looked old. The older brother had their chieftain's interest now. "He had this well. I think it was his well. He stabbed himself and then he put water from the well on it. It healed his wound, so I put some on Jacinto's leg. Zoc paused. He looked down at his rolled tobacco, tapping the ashes onto the dirt ground. What happened to your younger brother? Why was he hurt? Zoc raised a cigar to his mouth. Teo looked at Jacinto and then put his head down. He was attacked by a big cat. Zoc's fingers pressed into his grey-bearded cheeks. He then struck Teo with a leathery backhand. The older sibling fell back into a reed wall. He is not big like you. Protect him. Then he looked at his now healed son and Tea's damaged pride. Tea, you will take us to this healing water. Jacinto, feeling anew, sat on the outside of the hut, only being able to listen to Tea and his friends. Tea hadn't been able to resist storing some water for himself. He listened to one boy push back a mouthful of the water before beginning to dry reach. The drinker began to gurgle and moan with ecstasy, and then silence as he lay back with a thud. My turn, said Teo from inside the hut. He heard Teo begin to gurgle and moan. Careful, Teo, said another voice. There was a crash. Jacinto peered inside. His brother lay slumped against the wall, a dumb grin on his face. What do you want? Said one of the sober boys. Jacinto looked at his intoxicated brother. He looked fine but changed. His shoulders had become less pronounced, and his abdomen thinner. The light brown fuzz which covered Tea's chin had fallen off. The same sober boy hadn't looked away. Get out! Jacinto wandered the village until he saw his father and company returning from a hunt. The chieftain had a large deer slung over his shoulder with the ease of an unfamiliar man. Son, come here! Jacinto moved towards his father's strangely brightened smile, except that it wasn't his teeth that had gotten whiter, but his beard blacker. Zoc lit one of his long cigars and put his arm around the younger brother. Father, did you go to the well? Jacinto asked. We did. We decided to leave it be. The water would be too much of a burden for our village to bear. We get lucky enough with days like today, but they won't continue forever. Zoc retained his smile. But we could heal everyone. You'll understand in time, his father said, puffing away. There are some things too good for us. As strange as that may sound, son. Jacinto looked into the chieftain's eyes and nodded. Only the next day, Teo allowed Jacinto to hang out with him and his friends. A wood jug and 4 cups sat on the ground in front of them. Teo and his friend did 2 shots. They didn't moan or fall back. Jacinto looked at them, wondering if it was actually the well's water, but as it was poured, he noticed how it didn't splash or even ever seem to be disturbed. Teo spoke. We need more of it now to see the spirits. It's odd. See the spirits? Jacinto asked. That's just what we call it.
He looked into his dark cup and swallowed.
Jacinto's jaw hurt. He was sitting on a stump of a recently fallen tree. It had been hours, but the sun hadn't moved. He outstretched and threw himself on a patch of shrub. A glue-like feeling rested in his belly as he looked up at the canopies. The sun's rays reaching down and gripping the flesh of his abdomen. He heard footsteps. A dark figure glided through the trees past Jacinto. You! Hey! He lost his balance and fell. The figure stopped only for a few seconds, looked in Jacinto's direction, and continued. Hey! Come back, please! But the figure was gone. He began to feel dizzy and rolled over. A small dark cat was on a tree a few feet in front of him. It stalked a macaw. He thought of the panther that attacked him. His mental scene was broken as the black weight of a chimpanzee landed in the baby panther. It picked up the feline from its underside and smashed it into the tree's trunk. Jacinto emptied his stomach and passed out. He awoke close to the village.
He stumbled through the jungle and landed in this now strangely lifeless place.
The bitter smell of the water lay thick over the huts. Teo, how much have you... Jacinto threw his weight against the unlocked door and crashed onto the ground of his brother's hut. 2 toddlers sat with useless legs in front of him. They were both giggling away, drooling excessively. Teo sat where he was before, but 15 years younger. His face had become bulbous and his clothing oversized. Jacinto recognized him and slung his child brother over his shoulder. Mateus sat gleefully against his father's hut as Jacinto beat the door. "Father!" There was silence. "Father?" Jacinto pulled back the hatch door. The room was filled with cigar smoke. Upon his father's desk sat an empty bucket and pools of the murky water. He came closer and heard movement. Underneath, a brown baby laid, kicking its pudgy legs in the air. Around it sat its father's headdress and a mess of black hair. Jacinto cradled the infant, the tattoos on its arms distorted and the eyes still those of the chieftains. He placed his father back under the table and began to gag, but he had no water left to purge. He wouldn't be able to carry them both. Jacinto looked back on the village. He knew that it would become stagnated like the well. The younger brother knew there would still be many mountains to climb yet, so with Teo over his shoulder, he kept moving. Hello again. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd like to apologise first of all for the popping and the plosive sounds throughout this video. I'm still kind of getting my head around recording my voice and audio recording in general, so it's a learning process. This is probably the first story I've ever written that was sort of like historical, I guess, like not in current day. So I thought I'd kind of go for that, ancient Mayan or Aztec Empire sort of vibe about the whole thing, if that makes any sense. I wrote this story about 8 years ago, sort of intending it to be the first chapter of a longer work. And I wanted the mysterious stranger they encountered at the well to sort of be connected to my story park, sort of this like interdimensional, omnipresent being that offers people these, bargains or these deals with the devil, I guess you would say. But, that was about 8 years ago, so I don't know if that'll happen, if I'll actually extend this story. But if you like it, then maybe I will. So if you have any thoughts on the video or the story, just leave a comment below. I'd love to hear what you think. Bye for now.